All right. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's joining us today. We'll just give it a few more seconds until more people can join in. I can see a few others joining in as well. But in the meantime, a couple of housekeeping rules. First thing is we will be uploading this recording on our website. So if you want to take a look at it, watch it again after this, feel free to do that. And please use the Q&A section for any questions that you have. I'll try to address and answer all of them towards the end of the session. And in case not able to get to any of the questions, we'll be sure to follow up via email with you. Okay, probably just 10 more seconds until everyone settles down, everyone joins, and then we can begin. All right, I guess we can get started. We've got quite a few people here today. So again, good afternoon and good morning from wherever you're joining us today. In this session, I'll be focusing on building your identity resilience with HYCU and focusing on the Entra ID aspect of it. We'll be double clicking on that particular side of things, right? And just a quick overview of who we are for the ones who do not know much about HYCU. We are the number one SaaS data protection platform in the world. We've got over 4,600 customers across 78 countries and over 450 channel partners across the globe. And we have been backed by the likes of Bain Capital, Acru, Okta Ventures, Cisco Investments, and Atlassian. And we're proud to receive quite a few recognitions from, Gartner, Google, GigaOM. We have been recognized as a visionary in Gartner's Magic Quadrant for Enterprise Backup and Recovery for 4 years in a row. And we're also very proud of our NPS score, which is essentially the Net Promoter Score of 91, which is the highest in the data protection industry. And something we recently also were recognized with is by IDC. We were named a leader in the worldwide SaaS data protection, marketscape that they release. And as you can see from the graph, HYCU is literally at the top, at the forefront of this race. And it really is a testament to all the commitment that we have towards SaaS data protection and all the work we've been doing and all the protection that we are offering to our customers around their data. Okay, perfect. So with that, let's start with understanding and going into what the topic is for today is resilience around identity. But before we get into that, I want to quickly take a step back and look at what does data protection look like? What's the scope of it for any organization, right? And the way we look at it in HYCU over here is we've compartmentalized that as three I's in data protection. And the first one in that would be identity, which essentially is what we will be discussing and focusing on today. But that's going to include your Entra ID, your Okta, your AWS IAM, Active Directory, and similar workloads like that. And identity, of course, is a very, very critical piece of information or data that you have in your organization, which is why we're having this session today, because it cuts across your entire data landscape, right? The moment you open doors from an identity perspective, you open doors to your entire landscape, right? The second I would be infrastructure. Infrastructure in this case would be something like Nutanix, Dell, VMware, or your hyperscalers, which could be your AWS, Azure, and GCP. Right, and infrastructure, of course, is very critical for you to back them up because on that infrastructure lies a lot of different workloads, a lot of different data, databases, so many different things. And to protect that infrastructure, whether that's on-prem or on the cloud, is something that's really critical for an organization as well. And the third one is intellectual property. Now, intellectual property typically is the data that you generate. It could be stored on applications like iManage Cloud, on Box, or your code versioning platforms like GitHub and even Confluence as well. So all of this basically is around a lot of the data and information that you create. Thousands of man hours have gone behind it to create that data, and that's something that is your intellectual property, or it could be data of your customers as well. But that's something you really need to protect. What we'll of course be focusing on today is more on the identity part. and understanding what resilience means around identity. So let's answer that question. What resilience, what identity resilience really means. The first thing we'd want to look at here when we're looking at identity resilience is prevention. And I'm sure there are a lot of tools out there that focus on the prevention aspect. Of course, a lot of these are based on the tools that you're using, whether that's Entra ID or Okta or Active Directory. Essentially, it means that you'd want to ensure you've got a very strong security gate in front of your landscape, in front of all your data, and you've got the authentications in place, you've got MFAs in place, zero trust framework, so many different things that you ensure to that you ensure that'll ensure that your this door or this gate is stringent and that outsiders or attackers cannot break through that and enter your ecosystem or your landscape, right? The second thing in resilience comes detection. Now, let's say in case, an outsider or an attacker, or maybe an insider as well, has now entered your landscape, has now entered your ecosystem, and has access to your configurations, your data, your infrastructure, and so many different things. How do you now identify what's happening within your landscape and that ecosystem, right? That's where detection comes in, where somebody's in, all right, somebody's in, but you can then identify any kind of anomaly, any kind of policy drift, or some sort of threats that are, or misconfigurations that are happening because of some changes that are happening in the systems. Now, that's essentially the detection part of it, where you want to ensure that you're on top of any kind of activity, malicious, especially activity that's happening in your, IAM system. And the third thing, and a very, very equally important pillar of identity resilience is recovery and continuity. And this is where Haiku actually sits. This is where a lot of customers, a lot of organizations that we've seen and spoken to do not identify or do not focus on as much. But in today's day and age, prevention and detection, of course, are preventative measures before an incident occurs, before maybe large-scale deletion of data occurs or some sort of breach occurs. But in today's day and age, I think we all know and we've seen more than enough incidents around, um, you know, bad actors, going through prevention and detection systems and making changes, deleting things. And again, it doesn't always have to be a bad actor. It could be some sort of human error, it could be a script that's gone wrong. But that recovery and continuity aspect is often overlooked by a lot of organizations and customers that we've spoken to. So which is where we want to focus on today in today's discussion and understand, what this particular pillar looks like, why it's important, and why do we need to focus on that, right? So to start off, we've got a few examples here, right? And this focuses on a mix of insider threats, you could say, disgruntled employees, or something like a large-scale incident like Google Cloud in Australia had wiped off all the data for UniSuper. Or it could be in the case of MGM Resorts, which was an Okta issue actually, an IAM issue, which costed them about $100 million. So a lot of these different things, right? Or you can also see that, in the case of Microsoft, a small bug actually led to a lot of data loss for the cloud customers. So it's a mix of different things that can happen out there, and it could be human error, it could be technical issues in the background, it could be some disgruntled employees, it could be insider threats, so many different things, right? The point here with this particular slide is that even if it's on the cloud, even if it's a SaaS service, incidents do occur, and there are so many different ways in which your data can actually be affected, and which is why it's really important to focus and look at the recovery and continuity aspect of your identity resilience. Now, we also, ran a survey as part of our report where we found out that 75% organizations said that their businesses would be meaningfully impacted if their SSO and IAM configurations were to be unavailable. Now, of course, I personally believe this number should be higher, but this is what we, found in our report and the survey, which is still a very big number, where 75% of organizations do agree and do believe that IAM is a very, very, very critical part of their security and their infrastructure, and that if something were to happen to it, like a data loss or misconfigurations or for any reason was unavailable, it could really hamper and hinder their operations and business. Now let's look at, how I am, and this is where I say that identity is now the new control plane because it sits at the crux, at the base of a lot of different things that drives your operations and your business. So as you can see, Entra ID controls and manages your users, groups, SSO, access policies, lifecycle management, so many different things that really orchestrates all that's happening around this, right? People are doing their daily jobs. We don't even realize how things are working in the background, right? That Entra ID is actually in the background taking care of the authentication, the MFA, the authorizations, the security aspect of it, and just connecting everything so seamlessly. On the right, you can see a lot of these SaaS applications. On the left, you can see your Active Directory and your cloud accounts. And all of this essentially is being managed and controlled by this central system, which is Microsoft Entra ID, right? But if anything were to happen to that, all of this entire thing, the access right from identities and devices, they would not be able to access, the SaaS applications, the cloud services. Everything is essentially just halted, right? And that would basically mean that people are not able to access the applications which they need for their day-to-day basis. They cannot access the data that they require. They cannot access their cloud accounts. They cannot access so many different things. They will just basically be locked out, right? And as it's written below, when identity fails, everything fails. So the reason I'm hammering on this point is because I want to really communicate how important identity is and how important it is to build resilience around it. And if something were to happen, it'll hinder all of your operations and literally put your business at a standstill. Now, let's look at some of the things that can actually go wrong with Enter ID. And as we saw from some of the examples on, one of the previous slides, it could be things like technical error and, insider threats and so many different things. But I think one of the most common things that we've seen from, all the customer experiences and stories that we have, the top thing that, organizations still face today as a threat is human error. That's basically a lot of accidental deletions, some sort of misconfigurations which open up some vulnerabilities or make some series of changes. It could be anything, but human error can of course be at a large scale or even a smaller thing, but is one of the most common threats that organizations need to think of. And there aren't actually a lot of tools that can prevent uh, human error completely, right? You can do a lot of prevention and detection to keep the attackers and any kind of bad actors away. But human error is something that is going to happen, is bound to happen, and we just have to deal with it. Second thing is cyber attacks. So things like ransomware. I know Enter ID doesn't really have files and folders that can be encrypted, but we've seen cases where ransomware can affect Enter ID or IAM systems in a way that they encrypt that data. And to decrypt it, they're going to, of course, demand for a ransom. Then we have automation errors, some sort of scripts that are being run in the background, which can make bulk changes in the system. It can probably modify the values, it can probably change configurations, it can delete things in bulk. A lot of these things can happen. And automation and old unmaintained scripts we've seen in so many cases has actually messed up the data in many different ways. Then we've got third-party risks, which essentially would be any kind of third party that you're connecting with your Entra ID. Any system that has the ability to modify things, to add or delete things from your system. If something were to go wrong, configurations were wrong, it can actually delete or affect your data on Entra ID as well. And then finally, as we saw in the cases of Microsoft and Google, there are instances where there have been technical failures at their end, at the vendor's end, where there has been a mass deletion of data or inaccessibility. So these are some of the things that we've seen, and these are all from customer stories and our conversations with them. These are not hypothetical. We've seen so many cases of this happening across the IAM space. Now, finally, I think I'm sure a lot of us on this call already know this Microsoft's shared responsibility model. But the reason I will still include this today in this presentation is because a lot of us still forget that it is our responsibility. It is the business's responsibility to actually protect their own data. It is a SaaS service. It is on the cloud. A lot of organizations, in fact, most of them that I've spoken to have assume that because it's a SaaS service or it's on the cloud, it's already being backed up. It's already being taken care by Microsoft. But that's really not the case. I think Microsoft's shared responsibility model is quite popular and a lot of people know, but it also applies to Entra ID. And if your configurations are deleted or if your configurations are lost, your data is lost, they're not going to help you out in that particular scenario. Where they would step in is, ensuring that the infrastructure is in place, that if at an infrastructure level something were to go down, they will, bring it back up. But at a tenant level, at a customer level, in your tenant, your data, it is clearly your responsibility. You have to back it up. If you lose it, you have to recover that data yourself. They're not going to step in and help you. All right. So with that, let's now we've seen enough of why we need to protect our identity and what is identity resilience and why entity is important. We need to protect it. Let's now look at how we can actually protect the entity data with HYCU R-Cloud. Okay, just a quick overview of what our solution is. So essentially, HYCU R-Cloud is a platform, the underlying platform on which we have over 90 plus different modules, and Entra ID being one of them, right? So it's one single platform on which you can manage all the backup and recovery for all these different workloads across on-prem, cloud, and SaaS. Now, one of the key things that we focus on in Haiku when it comes to this particular solution and in general backup and recovery for all the workloads we support is the complete freedom and control with customer-owned storage. Essentially, that is bring your own storage, where customers can store all the backups on their own storage. And I feel today this is uh, way more important than ever before, because given whatever's happening around the world, policies can change, a lot of things can just change overnight. And it's always wise and always best for businesses to retain and have that control over their data, as opposed to relying on any third party, whether it's a large company, a global company, or a small vendor who's managing your data. I think it's very important in today's day and age to retain that control and have total freedom over how you want to manage that data, where you want to store it, freedom over or control over your sovereignty, control over residency. Everything should be in your hands. Tomorrow, if the vendor's down, you still have your data and you are still protected. Second thing is true immutability. That's something that Haiku supports. And because you can bring your own storage, immutability as well is completely up to you. So we support worm-locked immutability at a storage level, not a soft lock or an API level immutability. So it's really secure. And you have total control over how you want to manage the immutability. And with a lot of vendors today out there, they manage the immutability and the storage for you. Now, that's not in your control. You may have a few couple of configurations that you can, add on top of that. You want to do it in a certain way. You may have a few things you can control, but not like this, where you have total control over right from you setting up that immutability to how you want to strengthen that, and not just limited to immutability, but any kind of security and access around wherever your backups are being stored on your storage. So Haiku completely, supports that. The third thing is quick granular restores. Now, this could be restores of an entire tenant. Let's say you have lost data or there's a disaster, you can actually recover that entire tenant, or you can just go down, drill down, and recover a single item, a single user, a single group, a single configuration as well. So Haiku allows that level of granularity. And lastly, as I was mentioning, we protect way more than Entra ID today. There's Okta, M365, and 90 plus other workloads, which we'll be covering in a few slides down the line. All right, so a few more things about the Entra ID protection that we have on Haiku. First thing is backup autopilot, which essentially means that it's a set and forget, method in which you can just configure these policies where you can define your backup frequencies, the retention, where you want to store this, how you want to replicate these backups. You can have multiple backup copies automated on HYCU, one sitting on one storage bucket, the other one could be in a completely different, storage bucket or a completely different storage provider or on-premise as well. So you can actually replicate these automatically. So once you set them, just set them, assign them to your Entra ID source, and that's it. You don't have to come back to HYCU unless you want to recover any data. Second thing is flexible retention. The retention, you can retain your backups for 2 weeks, you can retain your backups for 20 years or 90 years, however long you want. The flexibility is totally in your hand, and you can define it the way you want. Then we have faster optimized backups, which essentially means that we support incremental forever backups for Entra ID, which means that your RPOs now can be very minimal. You can actually set up backups every few hours to ensure that your production and your backups are in sync. So we take one full backup initially, and the subsequent ones are all incremental or delta based. Then we have cross-tenant restores typically in scenarios of DR where your tenant's not accessible at all, or something major has happened on your tenant. You can actually recover all of that data from one tenant from your backup into a fresh new tenant and get things up and running. Then lastly, we've got the export option as well, also useful in a DR situation, or if you want to export some parts of your data, you can export either granularly or your entire tenant, which in whatever way you want. You can export that onto your own storage, and you have access to that data on your storage. And in terms of security and compliance, which is again very, very important because it's your IAM data. You want to ensure that it's very secure, not just on the IAM part of things, but also on the backups. You need to ensure that nobody can get to these backups. You need to ensure that they're being stored in the right way. And to do that, one of the key things that we support is encryption, and not just encryption in transit, which pretty much everybody supports today, but we also actually let you manage the encryption using either a HYCU managed encryption key, or you can actually bring your own key and upload that key onto HYCU. And once you do that, once you enable that, what HYCU does is it encrypts that data right from the source, right from when we're pulling it out from your Microsoft Entra ID, encrypted in transit and also encrypted in the storage target, which is your storage target. Right? So end to end is completely encrypted. You have more control over the encryption if you choose to bring your own key. And a lot of our customers actually bring their own key. It gives them additional security over their backups, and they know that it's being encrypted properly. And your backups, of course, are stored outside of the Microsoft environment, which is essentially your storage. As you can see on the right side, we support a bunch of different storage options. It could be AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Nutanix, Dell, something like Wasabi, or we support so many different S3 enabled storage options as well. And we have another thing, multiple backup copies. As I was talking about, you can have multiple backup copies stored in different locations altogether. You can have one in AWS, one in Azure, and your third copy or your archives in Google Cloud, whatever, whichever way you want to do it, right? Then nothing is, as I emphasized earlier, nothing is ever stored at HYCU's end. We do not store any of the customer's data. Everything is always in the control of the customer. They control how things work. They control where the backup sits. They control, how that backup is being managed, how it's encrypted, and whether it's immutable or not. It's totally in the customer's control. Then we have things like single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, RBAC, to ensure that the access itself to the platform, HYCU R-Cloud platform itself is secure, so that nobody can actually gain access to your backups. Nobody can restore or recover data, without them having to do it, like, without them supposed to be doing it. Then lastly, again, as I had mentioned, the immutability aspect. We support immutability at a storage level, not just at a soft lock or a API level. So you can actually code down into your storage and manage the immutability. Another thing that we also do, in addition to protecting your Microsoft Entra ID data, is that we also leverage your Entra ID to actually help you visualize what your data landscape looks like. So this is a tool called R-Graph, HYCU R-Graph, which is on the HYCU R Cloud platform itself. But what we essentially do is once you connect or configure your Entra ID with HYCU. It then helps you visualize and gives you a whole visual view in terms of what your entire data landscape looks like. And a lot of times, trust me, so many of the customers have no idea what's out there. The IT teams sometimes, in fact, a lot of cases, are not clear about what are the different SaaS applications that are being used in the organization. All the different places that data is being stored, and this is a lot of critical data that is being stored today. It's so easy to spin up new SaaS subscriptions. Your HR team might have, spin up a couple of things. Your finance team might, just, start a subscription for a couple of finance tools, which you do not have visibility into. So what rGraph does is essentially gives you that visibility, that visualization of your entire landscape, and it also helps you understand what is being protected today and what is not being protected. So you can see here that it's being compartmentalized into things like infrastructure, DevOps, ITSM, collaboration. There could be HR, finance, so many different categories, and it lists all the different workloads that are associated with that. And if you can see, there's an X mark or a tick, a green tick, which will signify whether that's being protected today or not. And let's say, for example, something like a GitHub, which has a lot of intellectual property, all of your code sits there and is not being protected. So for any reason, something's truncated or it's not accessible, you cannot access that data. It's your code, right? So it'll help you understand what's out there, what's being protected, and then help you, make that decision whether you want to start protecting that or not. All right, so that's about the Entra ID piece of thing, piece of the solution. Of course, as I had mentioned, we support much more than just Entra ID. One of the things that we enable customers to do is have comprehensive IAM data protection. A lot of our customers actually use Microsoft Entra ID and Okta together. They use both these tools, and it's a very, very big advantage that we are able to provide protection for both of them on a single platform. So you don't have to switch screens, don't have to switch vendors, don't have to manage multiple different things. Everything's happening on a single screen, one single interface where you can manage, track the backups and recoveries for all of these. And beyond that, of course, also is the larger Microsoft ecosystem. Entra ID, of course, is a key part of it, which manages the identities and the devices and all of that. But there are so many different things that typically organizations that use Microsoft use along with that. That could be 365, your SQL, VMs, GitHub, so many different Microsoft services that we support and are continuing to add more to this. So you can treat Haiku as at one single location, one single interface, one single dashboard to manage all of these in one single place. And lastly, as I was mentioning, we support over 90 different workloads, right from hybrid cloud infrastructure to cloud native to a lot of different SaaS applications as well. All right, so with that, there are a couple of QR codes on the screen here. So you could feel free to please scan it and get access to the data sheet. Or you could, take our click-through product demo as well, just to get a quick glimpse of how things look like. And finally, from there, you can definitely always, feel free to book a demo with us. We can take you through the entire system, tailored to what your use case is and tailored to what you're looking at. Perfect. So with this, I'm going to open it up to any questions that we have today, and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, I guess again, you can also obviously feel free to reach out to us after this session as well. You can reach out to us via email, LinkedIn, or on our website. If you have any questions on this, please feel free to reach out, and we'll be sure to get back to you with that. I hope this was insightful. I hope this was helpful, and hope you have a great day. Thank you all so much for joining us.